Hey everybody, welcome to Swedenborgian Life Live. Today we're going to be asking, did Jesus appear to aliens? How did it come to this? To quote Lord of the Rings, my name is Curtis Childs.
My life started out on a pretty good trajectory.
Wait, no one knows who you are yet.
Okay.
I'm the host of Swedenborgian Life. This is the Dr. Jonathan Rose, who's now reconsidering the trajectory of his career. Well, we've got a couple of problems here. You might say it's the weirdest title we've ever had for a show.
Yeah.
Did Jesus appear to aliens? I don't know. You guys can be the judges of that at home. And you might, how did we get to this point? Well, there's actually a very logical reason that we're here. It's because we're recapping. We're adding to the show we did last week, which was the
first mistake was that show.
The spirituality of extraterrestrials, based on Swedenborg's reported journeys through the spirit, through the universe. And so we've got an issue where you might have some people clicking away, but you didn't, thank you very much, because of the strangeness of the title and everything. But even beyond that, if we're talking about Jesus Christ incarnating on this particular planet for a particular reason, as Swedenborg says he does, you might lose a bunch of people who don't believe that there's a Jesus Christ, an incarnation of God. They think that there's God, but there's not an incarnation. But then also, there are some people who think there are multiple incarnations of God. So what does this offer? I would say you can still stick around, because this conversation also encompasses the value of written revelation.
Yeah, somehow that works
in general, and Earth's role in the larger universe. So we're going to dig into all that. It's a big conversation, so we better get our conversating muscles ready. We're going to do, as we always do, the icebreaker. Thanks everyone who is here chatting live. You can be a part of this show as we answer the question, you answer the question, and this is just how we probe your mind a little bit and see what's going on, what does this stuff bring up, and hopefully get our mouths working, because mine is like 75% of the way there. So let's see how this goes. This is the question. Does the question, which is a great question for this show, does the question of the existence of extraterrestrials have any relevance to spirituality? Because if you had to categorize this channel, it would be like a religion and spirituality channel, right? We talk about God and angels and related sort of stuff. What are we doing talking about aliens here? And are there, does it matter in context? Or why would you ever bring these conversations together? So what do you think?
And it's hard for me to get sort of objective, because I've had my head in editing Swedenborg's Other Planets for a long time, and it really influenced me. Who knows, for the better, for the worse. But part of what he says in there is that the question of whether there's other life kind of speaks to whether we're just random molecules banging into each other with Brownian motion, and it just ended up this way for no apparent reason, or is there kind of a design? Is there something going on? Is there a larger picture in the mind of God? And I think extraterrestrials play into that, and even what it is to be human, what we're doing here, and questions like that.
Yeah, I think that extraterrestrials, the question of that is a stress test on your religious system, if you have one. Because can your theology handle, does it fit that there are multiple planets with multiple people? And that Swedenborg's is so fascinating because it's such a seamless tie-in, that he meets people on other planets, but it just ties right into, as we're going to see, the concept of the grand human, the way religion works, everything, the way spirituality is. Right. But then also, just stepping back from the Swedenborg side of it, all the humility that we're trying to learn as a human race from understanding people that are different than us. The whole world is finally really all interacting and mixing.
That's right.
And we're having some growing pains.
Some issues, that's right.
But there's this greater understanding and humility, and in the end, unity that comes from, okay, I know you, you know me now, we can get along. Wouldn't that amp up if there were people on a whole different planet, and how it would go? Take love to the next level or something, and understanding. So I feel like there's a million directions we could take this in, but hopefully that's what the audience at home does. So we want to hear, what would you ever put those two questions, the extraterrestrial question and the question of God and spirituality, together? What does one have relevance to the other, and so on and so forth? Looking forward to what you all have to say. The ice has been broken. Let's get on to part 2. It's not weird enough. There must be more weirdness. Okay, the aliens thing, not doing it for me. Let's talk about the grand human. If you're not familiar, Swedenborg has his concept that he calls, well, that at its largest iteration is called the grand human. We did a whole show about it called The Shape of Heaven, which you can go check out, just in case they didn't pause it and go watch an hour-long program. Could you give us a quick rundown of what it is?
Yeah, Swedenborg has this interesting idea that our bodies are not the reflection of just sort of random evolution, but that there's a rhyme or reason to why we're put together the way that we are, and the different functions of the different organs, the kidneys, purification, and the heart pumping, and so on. And so he says that is actually a spiritual form, and that all of heaven is in that form. But then if you just slice the highest of the three heavens, that's also in that form. And then if you zoom into one community, it's also in the human form in some sense. And so it's the same on every level down to the individual. In fact, even if you looked at the individual's thoughts and feelings, he says, if you could really see it from spiritual light, even each of your thoughts and feelings is human it has a complete humanity in some interesting way.
It has all
so
the
it's sort
functions.
Of fractal. It's whether you look at it large or small, it's similar.
Right, so simple enough. But if that weren't enough for you, so the human form in terms of function and the way everything interrelates occurs at all these different levels. For example, as you said, a community of heaven can, if seen in the right way, reflect the human form when you look at what everyone's doing. But also, Swedenborg talks about people from all around the world forming one big human form together. So spirits of people who had died all over the planet Earth. He says that people from different religions, different continents and everything go into, because of the different way they think and feel about life, go into making the different parts of this grand human that encompasses heaven. However, that's just the Earth grand human. There's another grand human that's made up from all the people all over and all the planets and all the universe.
Much, much vaster.
Yes, and in that, it's not the people from Earth that make up the whole thing. We only make up the one little part of this grand human. And Swedenborg says that in this universal grand human, what do you think that the people from our Earth make up? I mean, and I do too. It's the physical senses. We are the physical senses of the universal grand human.
Hit pause for a second and say, it is so weird. Like, whoever says something like that? To actually say, here's how our whole planet, as diverse as we are down here, we all play this particular role relative to everything else that's out there. It's a really interesting concept.
I will plead guilty for Swedenborg on that he just says stuff like that, and there's not a lot of great analogs everywhere, but it's an idea that we think is definitely worth digging into.
It's amazing to think about.
We dug into it a bit in a previous episode. It was called Serpent Symbolism, Sensory Experience, and Jesus' Plan. And there we talked about how that we represent these, that we act on this sensory level, and that could be sort of a blessing or a curse, right?
Yeah, the physical senses are sort of a double-edged sword, the way Swedenborg describes them, because either they can be a container for all this higher stuff. So all this, love and wisdom coming all the way down from God can come all the way down to this sensory level on the outside, and it can be a magnificent experience. Or complete. Your senses can be just turned into a very materialistic perspective where you swear there's nothing else, there's nothing spiritual, there's no God, there's nothing beyond it. And so everything gets turned upside down there, and you trust your senses, and you won't hear anybody tell you about anything spiritual because you don't sense it.
Yes, we don't know what it's like, the classic character that's too materialistic or too external or too shallow, which means you're just concentrating on what you can feel and hear and see. But
I won't believe, sort of like doubting Thomas in the New Testament, who won't believe it unless he can put his finger in the wounds. That's the only way you can connect with it.
But on the other hand, there's no saintly great person that's ever existed that's not using some senses to navigate the world and to complete the way that they interact with people and everything. So the senses are supposed to be this grounding level that allows for spiritual life to rest on it like a foundation in a house. And looking at it that way explains Swedenborg's statement here in Other Planets 122. He says, in the universal human, the inhabitants and spirits of our planet relate to the external physical senses, and these senses are the outermost limit, in which the deeper planes of life find completion.
Completion, interesting.
And on which they come to rest as their shared foundation.
Yeah. Yeah, so that foundation is interesting, that it actually, things want to be based on that. We did a show along those lines recently where everything higher wants to come down and rest here, just like a foundation.
Right, and it goes on. It is much the same with the presence of divine truth in the writing that we call the Word, which for this reason too was given on this planet rather than on any other.
Whoa, so he's saying that we have the Bible, which he calls the Word, because we correspond to the physical senses, and that's an outermost function. And Scripture, too, is kind of an outermost function, which has something holy within it.
And we're getting into something really serious here. Since the Lord, meaning Jesus, is the Word, and is the first and last of it, he chose to be born and to become the Word on this planet so that everything would be done in accord with the divine design.
There's some passage, I think it's Ephesians 4, verse 10, that says that Jesus both descended and he ascended far above all, so that he could fill all things, it says. So there's something about that first and last and filling, that he came to this planet because we correspond to something outermost, and so he could fill everything in between.
Something about the nature of how people's minds were here and the state of the world here made it advantageous for Jesus to occur or manifest here. So we're going to get a little deeper into this. Like the physical senses, the Word, or the written Bible, Swedenborg says it acts as like a stable link between the earthly and the spiritual world.
Not just a fleeting thing, but again, playing the role of a foundation, holding up this superstructure.
Yes, and it can do that because you see that the literal text of the Bible is all about events that happen in this world, right? How would they be interested?
It's very concrete.
Yep, and
it's very concrete. A lot of the information you're getting is sensory, like it's about sheep and grapes and things like that.
Exactly. And the life of Jesus occurs all on these different locations on our planet.
In specific geographical locations, that's right. Yeah.
So that's not going to be very interesting to somebody from another planet elsewhere in the galaxy, but those earthly containers correspond. They are like the foundation to these divine and heavenly realities. So you might be saying that's a lot of things you said about the Word and senses, but wouldn't it be better if there wasn't even a written revelation in the first place? Right?
Yeah, right. It would be so great if instead of having to go to a book and read about a sheep and a grape or something and try to figure out what it means for your life, wouldn't it be awesome to have an angel appear and just tell you, hey, you need to do this in your life, and don't worry about that other thing. Let me encourage you. Wouldn't it be great to get a message like that? Very direct. It would be so far superior to this written, baffling revelation, wouldn't it?
And if that's how you're feeling, well, you were born on the wrong planet. This is Other Planets 120. On all other planets,
makes a lot of sense.
Divine truth is revealed directly by spirits and angels. Just like
on
you were
all other planets.
All other planets.
It's direct.
And we don't. When Swedenborg will say all, like he'll make these broad generalizations, but then there are exceptions. So we don't know that he's saying all, but he's definitely saying it's common.
It's very, very common out there. That's right.
This takes place within families, though, for on most planets, humankind live in separate families.
In other words, they're not in nations, or they're not gathered together in huge cities. They're families dwelling separately.
And here we get into an interesting sort of the downside to this kind of revelation.
Oh, really?
This means that the divine truth revealed in this way through spirits and angels does not spread much beyond the family in which it was received.
Oh, so grandma tells you what she dreamed, or she had a vision or something like that, but then she passes on, and then pretty soon people forget, and you just lose that thread.
Because of that, if new revelations were not constantly occurring, the truth would become distorted or be lost.
Two great dangers to truth, distorted or lost.
Right.
Like you don't want that to happen. So it's going to be whispered down the lane. I haven't thought about that, but if an angel appears to you and tells you something, pretty soon you might forget what it was exactly.
So now you're starting to see the issue and how the way we do it here actually provides an antidote to that. It is different on our planet, though, where the divine truth that is the Word remains in its integrity forever.
Wow. Yeah, interesting. Integrity forever. But when I think about it, it's true that we've had written revelations of one kind or another for thousands and thousands of years. I mean, don't you have ancient like Sanskrit that's carved into stone, literally written in stone, like they say. And so, and it's lasted all this time that it's still here. You have Egyptian hieroglyphs and so on. Some of it's painted on buildings or it's carved into stone and so forth. You also have this cool thing that they found a little while ago in Jerusalem that was a silver amulet that was rolled up from the 8th century before Christ, and it has a Hebrew blessing, the Lord bless you and keep you, the Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you, from long, long ago, and they rolled this up into a little amulet. Well, it's written on silver, literally, you know, and this thing still survives to this day. It's still legible. You can piece together what it's saying.
So that bit of revelation, you know, that led to that has been able to stick with us through centuries and centuries because of the nature of this writing. And you brought a couple of old,
and then you
dusty,
hit the point
books.
of movable type, and it just explodes, right? In terms of preservation. I mean, you can have just very old books. This is from 1697. It's got a cool old binding and everything.
That book is hundreds of years old.
And you can
still read it just fine.
And you can still, it's absolutely legible. Yeah, that's right. You know.
But I think the prime example is what you've got right here. What's this book?
This is Swedenborg's Revelation Unveiled, or Apocalypse Revealed, from 1766. It's the first edition. So he would have carried this with him around Europe. He sent copies back to Sweden, published in Amsterdam. And although it's written in Latin, it's just perfectly formatted, still perfectly legible. You know, and all you got to do is learn Latin and translate it, and boom, there you go.
Or have your friend learn Latin. But look, everybody. This is what we're doing right here. We are benefiting from the earth style of revelation right now. Because Swedenborg went in, he had this incredibly deep, complex interaction with the spiritual world. And because he was able to commit it all to type, we can now, hundreds of years later, make a YouTube show where we explore all the ins and outs of it. If he had just had that revelation and then told like some of his family members, it never would have trickled down. But now, any number of thousands of people can go in there and get something positive out of it.
Who knows how many people had that? And he even talks about that at some point, doesn't he? That he says that this has taken place by means of somebody who can publish these thoughts by means of the press. That was part of the design, was that we're going to keep these ideas here, and then you can translate. This has been translated into scores and scores of different languages. But if there's a new language comes online, they can go right here to the Latin, pull another, translation off of it. Like the source is still here; it's uncorrupted.
And Swedenborg being this little example compared to the dissemination of some other spiritual texts, but still a very potent one for this particular show. And people can misinterpret or mess with written revelation. You definitely have things go through iterations. People wonder, did somebody add this book to the Bible? When did this happen? But there's a source to go back to. You get pretty much the same thing. And if that original source, even if that becomes lost, Swedenborg says there was an ancient word before the Bible as it's known now. And he also says that in the other sacred texts from around the world, there are elements of that ancient word.
That's right. It even got into the Bible in early Genesis. But it was so obscure that people couldn't handle it anymore. And so he just replaced it. Like even if it breaks, he'll give you a new one.
But it's not the same as the replacing every single generation and almost every person. This is just a couple of upgrades to reach millions and billions of people.
Yes, and across thousands and thousands of years. And they say that the Bible now sells 800 million copies a year. So this thing is just very widespread. So because the conditions were right, because of the way we think, with our sense-oriented nature, the things we've discovered, all the way that writing is, this made it a good place for Jesus to come and get recorded. And the reason why it was this earth is not because this earth is better or worse, it's because this is the point of impact where we can impact the rest of the universe. This is from Other Planets 121. Since the Lord appears to the inhabitants of various planets in an angelic form, which is a human form, when spirits and angels from those planets hear from spirits and angels of our planet that God is an actual human being, they accept this as the word, acknowledge it, and rejoice that this is the case. So in the other world, that information spreads rather readily from one spirit to another, and they're all in touch with each other and everything. But how does that work down here?
Well, Swedenborg says that information can travel much better in the spiritual world. That there was actually, because spirits here learn about Jesus Christ, And what that means, they can help be this connecting bridge to the other angels and spirits in other parts of the world. It's just, this is like this sort of the original, this is the server, but the web page can go out everywhere.
Interesting. So like an exhausting job would be to be in charge of communicating this to the rest of the physical universe?
Yeah.
Exhausting.
Yeah.
You have to make a ship.
That was my first job.
You have to travel, thousands. I imagine we went through it, thousands and thousands of light years just to get to the, nearest constellation or something. And then what? You've got to start again somewhere, and it.
Right.
But by having this go up to the spiritual world and spread through the spiritual world, and then the fact is that the way people live their lives on other planets, a lot of them are very close to heaven. And so they can get this communication, and boom, goes up, goes across, goes down, and everybody knows. So it's not a limitation that Jesus was only born on one planet. Like the word gets around,
And actually something mystical about the actual process that Jesus went through to become the divine human through that whole saga, that has ripple effects out. Because the divine human that happened here can now go and visit people on any planet.
It became infinite, and so it's omnipresent, omniscient, all that omnipotent. So he can be present, and Swedenborg even talks in Other Planets about experiments they did where they took people from Earth who had seen Jesus during his lifetime and other people who'd seen this God figure on their planet, and it was the same person, that kind of thing.
That's right. So as sort of a recap to this section of it, you have Jesus Christ appearing here because conditions are right in a couple of ways, that we would be the kind of people who would be able to keep things in perpetuity by writing, by the technology that we have.
Yeah, we're the kind of nuts who figure out how to do this and keep this around or something, keep it out of the rain.
And that this was also the way that this incarnation could happen and then could go and service the rest of the universe. So,
and because we're the outer senses, that would also, those things are intimately linked.
Yes, that's right.
But then he would be on all levels at once and be able to reach everybody.
Yep, and reaching everybody is what it's all about. That's the whole point. We're going to get a little more into the importance of the physical senses and the sort of, or the sciences that we pull out of our interaction with the world through our senses. And a little more, of course, conversing with aliens in part 3.
Oh.
So if you guys watched the show, the extraterrestrial show that we did, there was Planet 1 and Planet 2. This is going to delve a little deeper into his interaction with the people on planet number 1. And these were some extraterrestrials that were very surprised that we write on paper. This is Spiritual Experiences 4663. I spoke with them about our Earth, since they were amazed that such things could be described on paper, that such things are known on our Earth and not, as far as yet, known on others. And that on this planet there are sciences which have been enlarged by the fact that they can be written down on paper and thus be left to others in posterity.
Enlarged, I like that. Again, you make a discovery, but now you have a way to communicate with a lot of other people about it.
Not just religious type revelation, but revelation about everything.
I chop this leaf up and this is what happened, I mixed this with that and this is what happened, or I figured out this how to make metal or something.
And that consequently there are many technical arts on this planet. It was granted to me to tell them that the reason for this is that from the earliest times those on this earth have desired to become wise in such knowledge. That this was depicted by the tree of knowledge in paradise. And that because they had eaten of it, they therefore, this will just throw a huge thing at the end here, they therefore cannot be healed by any other means than by knowledge, sciences, thus by the knowledges of faith.
Yeah, that word that Swedenborg uses there in the Latin for knowledge can also be translated sciences or academic disciplines, and he gives many different kind of examples like optics, but also philosophy, literature, and so on. So what an interesting statement to say that we couldn't be healed because we were so hooked on this idea of knowledge. We couldn't be healed without it. It reminds me of the, there's this book I studied in graduate school called Boethius' Consolation of Philosophy, and he talks about this figure of philosophy who has basically the Greek equivalent of a letter P on the outside of her garment, because that means what's practical, praxis. but the top was theoria. The idea was that through learning worldly things, these sciences, mathematics, astronomy, various things, you eventually got to the point where you could see God. And it's, to me, kind of, that's what the theoria meant. It sounds like theory, but also means just beholding the face of God. So the idea, wow, what would math have to do with beholding God? But that was the idea, was that, hey, we're hooked on this knowledge, and this is our pathway to God.
And because we chose this, sort of exploring via the senses pathway, that's the way we can get healed. Isn't that kind of reflected in the way that technology and society is? That we don't have this perfect relationship with nature. Like, we have to invent medicine, we have to invent agriculture, all this stuff to be able to sustain ourselves.
Technologies and all, that's right. And other people who are just living loving lives with each other and simply living off of nature or something are not spending all day figuring out, what is the atomic weight of, carbon or something.
On the flip side, this stuff is really cool, and it's allowed us to do some amazing things. And this is also this really good byproduct,
including, frankly, this show.
This is, of course, the crowning achievement of all this stuff. So this is something actually unique that people from our Earth are offering to the rest of humanity. And in Swedenborg's travels, it does say that he was traveling with spirits from our Earth, and those spirits would really rub other spirits the wrong way. Because out in the universe,
sometimes that interaction did not go well.
Like, how can you be so
like each other.
Materialistic to our spirits?
Because people who are very spiritual was like, oh man, the only things you care about are these very external things, and we're trying to have lofty thoughts about God and everything.
On the flip side of that, though, is in the proper order, it can be we can be fulfilling a really important function. That we can be giving the whole something that it lacked.
We Earthlings who are sort of with this focus that we have on nature and science and so on.
This is Spiritual Experiences 1531. The inhabitants and spirits of our Earth are the outer sense, and they are carnal.
Carnal means like fleshly or very sort of external focus.
Doesn't sound good.
Bodily focus. No, it doesn't sound good.
But even though they are like this on this earth, nevertheless, they possess knowledge of religious truths.
Oh, interesting. So I guess from all those books, you can get this knowledge of religious truth.
In case you're starting to get down on your earth heritage, there's some cool stuff coming up here.
Yeah,
which can serve as a kind of soil in which the spiritual and heavenly truths of religion can be implanted. Without such a soil, religious truths do not easily become implanted and grow.
Oh, interesting. So there's a truth, like there's a multiplication factor. If you have that soil, you can actually get farther in understanding of spiritual things. And I think about Swedenborg himself, major scientist guy, right? And that's the guy who can really understand all this stuff about God and heaven, because he's got that science background. Interesting. Okay.
Yep. That was essential to him painting the picture.
You're bringing me around.
Good. Therefore, also, they, meaning people from this earth who are immersed in learning, they come more easily into the inward and the very inward heaven after their outward elements have been purged.
I like the idea that there's a purge that's possible, because there's a danger in just being external. You might get sort of hooked on the food or whatever, and so you need some purging. But that doesn't block us from the higher heavens at all. It says they can come quite readily because they have those truths.
Yeah, so there's kind of a risk-reward thing.
That's right.
And because they bring something with them from the life of the body, they also serve as ministering spirits for instructing others who do not have that higher knowledge from revelation.
Whoa! So our crazy people from this crazy planet actually end up being teachers on the other side, because we've got a lot of knowledge.
Yep. If there is to be perfect order, heavenly truths, and whatever comes next, spiritual ones, I should have known, heavenly and spiritual,
of course,
must take root in truths of nature.
They must.
But it should be noted that the higher knowledge and mental imagery of the angels are incalculably more profound than the mental imagery of people on earth, yet are nevertheless rooted in truths of nature. And so truths follow one after another and correspond.
So it's really like you can get this greater tower of truth going on if you really have a better understanding of the outer level. I notice how much Swedenborg studied anatomy, for instance, and then he's able to have greater insight about the way heaven works because he actually understands the ductless this and that, and
Yeah, well, if you think about if we're going back to the idea of human beings from this earth as sight, or as the senses in the grand human, you think about a body, it's not like, okay, which part's the best? Is it the senses, or is it the the immune system, or is it the cardiovascular system? The point is, everything is doing this amazing service for the whole, and the senses are this crucial point of learning and interaction. This is how the organism survives and grows. Everything is dependent on that. So if we from this planet, if you happen to be interested in the external world, we can bring that and use it to serve everyone else, learn from them, they learn from us. Obviously there's a great amount of spirituality out there for us, but we also have something to contribute as well.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that you don't need to have it, all the elements of this. Like, it's not like, oh no, you're not going to go to heaven if you don't know enough.
Yes.
It's enough that there are various different people, because everybody's teachable.
Yeah.
So some people know this discipline, some know that. If you have this desire and passion in your heart, you can learn anything on the other side.
Yeah, this is like the moment of, don't take the episode to mean we're saying that you have to learn a lot of stuff to take advantage of being a person and go to heaven, because Swedenborg goes on and on about how if you've got a good heart, that's much better than having a bunch of knowledge.
That's
so,
right.
But we are saying...
But it's cool that there are some people who are good people who know a lot of stuff, because that ends up being good for everybody, not just people of this planet.
And just think about, this is what the human race is accomplishing together. All this stuff, all the sciences, all the technology, of all kinds, the music, the art, everything we're making can serve not just the human race here, but the human race from the entire universe. And part of it is the actual way we're able to do things, preserve manuscripts. But the other part of it is the impression it makes on your soul. On your mind and heart, living in this world, interacting with it. That's going to make you a special kind of love and wisdom that can serve in a way that no one else can. So that's good. That's not too bad.
That's good. Yeah, knowledge gives you sort of folders in your head, doesn't it? So if you know basically nothing about food except this tastes good and I don't like that, you can only get so far. Yeah. If you know all about, these are proteins, these are omega-6s, omega-3s, the more you know, the more you can really refine your game food-wise.
That's right. And if you don't know, somebody else does, and you just eat what they tell you to eat, and then you tell them something they didn't know. Very good. All right, well, so hopefully this has got to have been too confusing for somebody, right? Hopefully there's a couple of questions, and we're going to get to those right on the other side here. Okay. What's on your mind, everybody? We'd love to know if you're here commenting live on YouTube. Get your questions in right now. We're going to answer them in some kind of order resembling the order in which they were received. Let's get to our first one right now. Mary Richards asked, do extraterrestrials living in our solar system know that there are people living on Earth? So we would begin by saying, you might say, hey man, there's no extraterrestrials in our solar system. And we would say, well, that book on the planets by Swedenborg. Swedenborg says there are. And then that gets into the whole conversation of, well, how is that biologically possible? And then you have everyone who's saying, well, they're spirits, but they're in a different sort of plane of existence, or they exist at a different point, or all the different. So the explanations people have had. Or
different. Like a bandwidth, a different like frequency or something.
Or that Swedenborg was just lying and made it up, or he was mistaken and those spirits were actually
living
from
on
somewhere
the inside
else.
of the planet.
Whatever your pick is. The question is, what they know about, from a Swedenborgian perspective, I guess is our answer, do they know about people on Earth? When Swedenborg went to travel to these other planets in the solar system, were they like, what's Earth? Or were they like, yeah, okay.
One of the things that Swedenborg says is that it's something that everybody finds out very shortly after dying, that there's this contact between the different planets. It's just, we don't know about it here, we go there, everybody knows about it. And then, as we said earlier in the show, spirits from those other planets are more in touch with their people. So I think if there's some use for them to know, if they were curious about it, that information would be available through their spirits.
Right.
But I can't think of an example where Swedenborg just says point blank, oh yeah, they all know about us,
yes,
or something. The spirits, absolutely, yeah, the spirits do.
Yes, and he doesn't paint a picture of, which is often the reverse in sci-fi, that aliens are much more technologically advanced than we are.
Yeah, that's right.
And that they're sitting there
that
looking.
He's got very sort of golden age people living in simplicity, and we're the technologically advanced ones who are interested in that. So it's sort of like we see them in our own image, that we think, oh, they must be super advanced.
Right. Which isn't to say that there aren't technologically advanced aliens in the universe. He only describes a couple planets. There could be another one that flies around. But I guess the point I want to make is he's not saying that all the other intrasolar system aliens are sitting there with satellites, invisible satellites over our planet, and they know it could well be they don't know anything about it. So let's hope that when they learn about us, we make a good impression, right? Regenerate, reform. Okay, that's a great question. Let's look at the next question. Sandra Brewster asks, does Swedenborg ever talk about backsliding? You know how we can be messed up with our senses. 2 steps forward, 3 steps back kind of thing. Did Swedenborg deal with any backsliding himself, I would imagine? Yeah, so the unfortunate thing about the process of regeneration, as Swedenborg describes it, is it's not, hey, I got up the steps and now I'm done. That much like winter occurs every year, and night occurs once every 24 hours, roughly, we are going to continually be going through these low and high points. Even angels, Swedenborg says, will go through periods where their ego and things are
start getting in the way or something.
Yeah, somehow inflamed, and it's a problem. I would argue, and it may be semantics, that it's not actually backsliding in those cases, because even though it feels like, oh, I'm back in something, every time you go in, it's like we said in a different show, it's like a spiral up.
Yeah, the spiral.
Because you've improved every time, so you want to get back into that stuff, but you're doing it with a new skill set and a new mind, incrementally, every so much. But that doesn't mean there's no such thing as backsliding.
Yeah, and Swedenborg talks about, like, when he had there was one particular point in his spiritual awakening, we talked about in one show, I think, where all the smoke came out of his pores and turned into exploding frogs on the floor.
That might be
and all
weirder
this stuff.
than...
And it certainly doesn't hurt in a show like this tonight.
Let's do another show that's called The Exploding Smoke Frogs.
Yes,
that was my band in middle school.
And I think it was a picture of purification that was going on. He talks at other points about the fact that he could not believe he doesn't use the word junk, but that's the way I would translate it, that would surface in him, the types of thoughts that he was like, what am I thinking? Mm-hmm. You know, and so I imagine there must have been times where he thought it was backsliding, and then he says after years he realized, oh, this is purification. This is actually like getting stuff out of your garage in your basement, in your attic or something, and putting it all out in the lawn, and it looks much worse for a while, but actually it's a purification process.
Yeah, and think about anything that's analogous to it, getting healthy. It's not like you exercise, and when you're exercising it feels like, I feel like really bad and I'm short of breath and it's burning, but then I'm out of it, and then finally you're going to go through that multiple times, hundreds of times, to try to get an improvement in the way that health is. So there's that.
And he talked about times too when he couldn't. There were times when he had this great light, and there were other times when he couldn't. He said when certain spirits were with him, he couldn't understand anything.
That's right.
And so I imagine that felt like, whoa, we have really fallen here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he definitely went through those cycles, and as you say, even angels do.
So I guess that I want to have it as a setup to say, even if you feel like you're backsliding, doesn't necessarily mean you are backsliding. On the other hand, Swedenborg does talk about backsliding, and in a particularly potent way, he talks about what he calls profanation.
Oh, true.
Which is...
Now that's one to avoid. Yeah, that's bad.
That is when you really understand and love what's true and good. So you know what's the right thing to do, you're doing it. And
you're enjoying it.
It's not just like you do it once, but this becomes your mode of life.
Becomes your life, right.
But then you leave that and say, like, nah, I don't care about this stuff anymore. I'm going to go back into evil.
Go back and be a horrible person.
And it's got to be...
That's really bad. Turning back. That's what he says it means in Scripture when Lot's wife turns back and she turns to a pillar of salt.
Right.
That's what he's talking about.
And it doesn't, because I think everyone that's ever read into profanation is always worried about it. But I don't think it's like I'm trying to be a good person. I made a mistake. That's not profanation. If you're
there are safeguards. Really, I think to profane, you have to put your heart into it. You really got to go for it.
Yeah, you wouldn't be, if you're doing something like that, you wouldn't be worried about it. You'd just be like, nah, this is where I want to be. Yeah. So that is problematic because you're then like, the good and the evil is really hard to separate then.
That's major backsliding. And that's what's meant by the biblical story of where one evil spirit was in the house, it came out, the house got swept, and then it brought back 7 devils worse than itself. And the latter state was worse than the former. That's what he's talking about.
And I think that is rare, and I think the stuff that we're going through, most of us, while we're trying to do spiritual growth,
normal neurotic
difficult,
stuff. Yeah. No, that's difficult.
And I totally, like, with Swedenborg stuff, there are times, I get these times when I feel like, I'm invincible with this stuff. Like I can just go from one thing to the next. I'm getting all this energy from it. I know how to handle every situation. It's great. And then I'll just realize I'm 6 months into just this. I'm much less spiritual than I was then. And I think that's just part of it,
Yeah, I love that show about spirals because that really spoke to me about the cyclical nature of it. It's not so much backsliding as just going around and coming around again.
And that it's so complex. The process is so complex that we never really know where we are.
No, that's right.
Okay, hopefully that's encouraging.
Good, yeah.
Okay, let's do another question. This is from Nicholas Cole, because I think Swedenborg says in the afterlife that the stars in the sky are other communities. So if you follow the above, as above, so below, then it's the same for us. So that's definitely true that he talks about communities of heaven being represented like the stars, that the angels would talk with him about, look, these are like all the communities. And in a way, if you're as I take this question, there's this habitable planets around other stars potentially.
Oh, interesting.
So you could be seeing, the same thing. There are really people out there.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about it that way. But that's cool. And he does talk about it because apparently from the point of view of the world of spirits, there's this area in the middle, as some of you may know, after you die, that Swedenborg calls the world of spirits. And that's sort of a sorting ground. And then you go to either heaven or hell. And from the point of view of the world of spirits, the heavens look like stars. It's not like they're just next door or something. You often can't even see them. It's as distant as they are here.
Doesn't he say? He says that people are surprised that heaven is not just above them, but below them, like all around them well. Just like there are stars all around.
Yes,
the earth.
That's right. And it's a cool idea to think that there are people out there somewhere who are living these beautiful lives just like the golden age or something. It's a cool thought. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah, and there are layers of reasons why looking at the stars makes you feel like you do, why it's inspiring good. One can be this sense of, you're just getting a subliminal realization that, hey, we're looking at you, friends out there. Another can be that this is a physical representation of heaven. And a third,
and the vastness of the divine love.
It's just they're pretty.
Yeah, right.
That's good. All right.
And humbling. That's cool.
We'll do one more quick one. So this is Robert Bush, who says, is it possible that people lived on our planet billions of years ago? We have so far seen nothing. You mean like planets in our solar system? I don't know. They just found that carbony sort of stuff on Mars that makes them think life was there 1 point something billion years ago. But my understanding is they're just talking about microbial life, like tiny little life, but they don't know for sure, of course. And this, in another show, we put up this article where people say, how would you know if there were, I feel like how would you know if there were ancient aliens on our world?
Right.
I feel like we would know. I mean, you would have found, because you find fossils that are so well preserved, wouldn't there be some kind of
something?
If their architecture would be, but then again, if they were here for a much shorter period of time, I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like the whole universe is set up in such a way that information just radiates out.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I was seeing a show the other day where just by taking a film of a paper bag that's sitting there, they could reconstruct the conversation that someone was having without any audio feed. It's just all the information about the conversation is in little micro motions in the paper bag in response to the conversation. It's just in there. The truth is in there. It's in all over. you know.
Yeah.
So if there were people, you would think there would be some discoverable information about that. But time, these vast amounts of time,
Yeah.
you know, so much erosion, so much change in the whole nature of the land, you know, who knows? I don't know. But the one thing that Swedenborg really communicates to me very effectively along these lines is that divine love just wants to have people to love, wants to be loved by people, and just isn't satisfied with a few billion here and a few billion there, you know. Right. So it would be very surprising if like nothing was going on anywhere, you know.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you tied it into the Swedenborg thing at the end, because I feel like that question placed us happily outside our field of expertise. Okay, everybody, thanks so much. That was great getting to chat a little bit with you, the audience, and that's something that we want to do as much as possible. So in this next segment here, we're going to get to show you an interview that I did with a member of the audience and a very awesome soul. So let's get into it now. All right, everybody, so I'm talking here with Joy. Joy, I want to start where we usually start, as we see your cute puppies in the background there. What led you to find the Swedenborg thing in our show in the first place?
Well, the algorithm did me a favor and suggested you, and I saw your face over on the side. I had been looking at some things because of some friends of mine who were very into mediums and things like that. And I think that it brought up some of the near-death experience type things. And I kept seeing your face over there, and I just kept being drawn to want to know what you were saying. I was afraid that you were going to be channeling somebody, but I was very happy when you weren't. And once I listened to the first one, I just was getting so much food, so much of what I needed. I was resonating with every single word. I couldn't believe it. I was so so excited, and I thought any minute that was going to stop. Y'all were going to say something crazy, or there would be something that would make me able to resonate with it anymore. But I've watched every show, I believe, over and over and over again, and it just gets better every single time.
That's amazing, with all the stuff that we say, that none of it finally crossed that line. So what you said, it resonated with you. What kind of things, what concepts in Swedenborg's material have made an impact for you?
Divine providence is huge, because I do believe that. I believe that we can't see the whole big picture, but if we could, we would understand that he's on our side, God's on our side. It's all set up. As Rumi said, it's rigged in our favor. And so just to lean into that and not even spend any time resisting what's going on, because trusting that what's going on is in our best interest. I really like that. I really like the Swedenborg version of heaven and hell, because it's the only one that's ever made any kind of sense to me. And because of the fact that I was taught a heaven and hell, I knew that there had to be some kind of meaning there that I was missing. And the Swedenborg version is it just resonates with everything that I know to be God. Obviously that Xena knows to be God too, because she jumped on the computer, if you saw a wiggle.
Yeah, that's your dog. And you were just telling me that your dogs have been kind of teaching you spiritual lessons. Could you say a little bit about that?
Every single thing about them. Do you want me to tell the thing about screaming when they get out of the path?
Yes.
When they were little, like maybe 2 or 3 weeks old, they would get off of the porch, and over in this little area, I would get them back up there, build things to not let them go where they didn't need to be, but they would still end up over there, and then immediately start screaming at me. I mean, scream, wah, 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 like it was the end of the world. And it was, I saw it as a correspondence for how I can be for God. He's got me exactly where he needs me to be, for everything that I need to learn that is for my best good and for me to be able to be as useful as I can be. Instead of focusing on that, I'm screaming, move me, save me, help me, do something else for me, you know, instead of just going with the thing. And every single thing about them has been like that, has given me some kind of a thing that makes me want to do better with my attitude with God, for one thing. And also, doesn't that even kind of go with the throwing yourself into hell in a way? You know, I'm trying as hard as I can to keep them safe and to do whatever, but they get their own ideas going on, and I wouldn't wish them any harm. I love them. They get themselves in trouble.
Yeah.
Any sense?
No, it makes total sense. It's an awesome correspondence.
Like, you know how they've got Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance, and Zen and I'm going to have Christianity and the art of puppies or something.
Puppy maintenance. Yeah, and so you said that you'd watched all the shows, you know, more than once. What is it that keeps you coming back? Do you feel like you get more as you understand the concepts more fully?
Yes, that is an amazing thing. I've just noticed in the last couple of days, I watched some that I hadn't watched in a long time, and I thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe how much more stuff there is in there. Because I guess the first time through, I almost always immediately watch it twice. Just because I don't want to be worried about missing anything the first time. I'm greedy for you guys. If you don't do a show, I'm annoyed. Like, people laugh at me. Because I was like, oh, there should be a new Swedenborg. There's no new Swedenborg. They didn't tell me there wasn't going to be a new Swedenborg this week. I'm hungry for it. You don't even know how much I need it and love it. Yeah, it's because as we talked about, it's practical. It gives you tools. It gives you something to hold on to that it's lonely if your spiritual path doesn't match up with anyone else. And when you're hearing truth that does resonate with you, it's just a healing thing just in and of itself, just that. And then everything you say, it's like you pull together everything that I already believed, everything that my path has led up to. All of the good parts of it are there, said in a way that I could have never said it, just put into a beautiful new frame that is what I already believed. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it's awesome. The idea that there's a sort of a, now there's a framework to put all these pieces that you already had in there.
I grew up with a huge love for the word. There are a lot of wonderful things that I got out of my upbringing, and you know how some cultish type situations, I think they don't really stress the word. Mine did. Mine were very nice people, and they wanted you to read the Bible and memorize it and things like that. And I always got it already given me. I always just had a big, huge love for the word. So the fact that Swedenborg is so based on the word, that does me good. There's another one besides heaven and hell and divine providence. There's another. Oh, this is extremely specific. Can I give you like an extremely specific example?
Yes.
I also have to tell you, if I say Swedenborg, if I say, well, actually Swedenborg says, well, according to Swedenborg, all of that, everybody's eyes just glaze over, and I listen to, they're talking about aliens and stuff. It annoys me how people won't listen to Swedenborg, because he is so much more, Shane will listen to Swedenborg. He's so much more reasonable. Anyway, it's like they want something weird. They want to look for truth. See how judgy I get? How quick I get so judgy. Anyway, that wasn't even what I was going to tell you, and now I forgot what I wanted.
No, you were talking about when you mentioned Swedenborg, people's eyes glaze over.
So now guess what I do? Oh, and my mother is you can't put this anywhere, but my mother is a Pentecostal preacher. You can put that, I guess. But so immediately whenever I said anything about him, she just instantly said something about him having pre-Adamic revelation. I don't even know what she was talking about, but she had a big, huge speech of why I needed to stay away from Swedenborg. And I already had all of these wonderful things. So with my mom, because believe it or not, we can talk about spiritual things. Yeah. I just don't say Swedenborg. I just say, I heard somewhere, or when I was listening, I just don't say Swedenborg, and she loves it. She preaches it. Some of the concepts she then goes and preaches. And this is one of them. Jonathan Rose said it. Talking about how in the Old Testament they got real into detail about the rules, and it said if your ox killed someone, but you didn't know your ox was bad, then you're not responsible for that at all, but kill the ox and don't eat the meat.
Yes.
Do you remember y'all talking about? That's why I feel funny to give such an obscure example.
No, it's great.
It was that whole show was trippy the way it went with my life. I was I was disappointed when I saw the name of it. I can't remember what the name of it was, but
I don't either, but we'll pull it up. We'll find it.
It made me think that you were gonna, which I think is very patient and kind and wonderful of you guys, the way that you care a lot about the people who struggle, and I do understand why bad things happen.
Yep.
And the evil and all that, but I struggled with that long time ago, and already came up with my own whatever, and I think I was feeling slightly arrogant that and then that made me laugh, because you wouldn't believe how childish and the thoughts that had popped into my head that week. For instance, vandalizing somebody's car. I'll just go right down to it. I've never thought of vandalizing somebody's car. I thought I was self-righteous about it. I thought everyone needed to know what a horrible person he was, and that I literally entertained the thought before I thought, you are entertaining the thought of, and then I thought, what is wrong with you that you could suddenly do that? Then y'all had that show, and it was a thought that was completely not the kind of thoughts that I would ever think, and so I wasn't going to eat that meat. It also, you'll have to tell people all that, what all that meant.
I will. We will.
I'm not making it very clear. Okay.
No, I know. I know exactly what you're talking about. So
I didn't want to eat that meat, and I didn't want to make anybody eat any meat. Like, that has stuck with me. Like, I don't like if it's evil. Oh, the concept of feeding the evil, that's big. I don't want to feed the evil. Like, and if it's a thought that God wouldn't be saying to me, then I'm going to be aware of that and not listen to it, not feed it. For goodness sake, I switched subjects, but that's another Swedenborgian idea that I love very much. But
awesome.
That whole thing about not eating the meat, and then it made me, like, if there are people who are acting really bad and doing really horrible things, I felt really determined not to make them eat that meat, not to think to myself that that's who they are, to keep remembering that they're God's precious puppies.
Oh, that's a great tie-in. Cool. Well, Joy, I really appreciate getting a chance to meet you and hear how you're not just hearing the material, but really like using it in life and expanding on it. And it's awesome just to get to hear that. So thanks so much for taking a little time to chat.
Thank you so much for all the meat and water.
Absolutely.
So, talking to Joy, who I heard is watching right now.
Hey,
how you
Joy.
doing? There's two things we need to cover here now. One is the episode that she was referring to with the altar and the horns and holding on, is Life Isn't Fair, or is it? Go check that out if you want to see a little bit more, if you felt like that was useful. And then in there, she was like, people want to find stuff about aliens, and Swedenborg is more practical, so we put we were planning it, but that just lined up that her interview was on a show about aliens. So I think this has got to be the one where she's finally going to say, I'm done.
That's it.
I'm not watching.
I'm out of here.
Yeah. And we don't blame you at all. Just kidding. Thanks very much, Joy. All right, we're going to now get to everybody's responses to the icebreaker question. Let's do it. If you remember, we had a question at the beginning of the show. And the question at the beginning of the show was something like this. Does the question of the existence of extraterrestrials have any relevance to spirituality? This is what the people said.
Oh.
It absolutely does, because it can teach us more about the nature of God and his direction, not only for us, but for the whole universe. That's Jake the Snake. Love it. Carolyn says, it's relevant because we on Earth are probably not the only ones entitled to be spiritual.
That's right.
This path is a path that's built for a lot more than just us to walk on. Pace yourself. I think it would help us have more humility to recognize there are sentient beings out there and we aren't the only game in town. Thomas says, yes, because life fills the universe. If you can fill this earth, how many others? It speaks to the infinite nature of the Lord.
I love it.
And Alma says, I find it amazing. The universe is the Lord's vineyard, and of course he is going to plant his children throughout it to beautify it, to have responsibilities over it. It must be to prepare us in some way to be more like him.
That's really nice. I like that.
John Child says, it seems to me that life is abundant because God is abundant, so there is an abundant human life in the universe. And this is key to an expansive spirituality. Further kind of pushes us away from we are the center of the universe. That just becomes impossible.
I like that.
Matthew says, absolutely. If there is another planet able to sustain life, which I think there is, then wouldn't they all have the same God? Definitely.
Definitely.
Bonnie says, knowing there are other people or spirits on other planets has made me so humble. it looks like there are other people behaving much better than us. Anything that leads to humility we'll take.
Yeah, that's right.
There's something
That's
good there.
good.
Nick says, yes, it does, because everything is connected and also connected to the Lord.
Nice.
And that's a great
Awesome.
thought to end on. And hopefully you guys felt some kind of connection with the material here, strange as it was. I certainly felt it hanging out with all of you, hanging out with you, Dr. Jonathan Rose. If you guys want to help connect this video to the rest of YouTube, please like and subscribe. That's what's going to get it out there. And if you're subscribed, subscribe like you mean it. What I'm saying is there's a little bell next to the subscribe. If you don't click that bell, YouTube will never really tell you that we have a new video out, and why wouldn't you want to know that there's stuff like this coming out? I mean, this stuff is top shelf. If you want to help this stuff continue and even improve,
yes.
consider joining us on Patreon. It's where you just give a small amount per month to help support us. We're a nonprofit. This is how we can do things. And in return, just to say thanks, we'll be giving you some behind-the-scenes conversations and interactions and throwback videos and all kinds of stuff. It's just our little way to say thanks for, and we do want to thank everyone on there for helping make this possible. Looking forward, this coming week, we have a show next Monday about perception. What is perception?
That's right.
Well, it's intuition.
Intuition.
That's where we'll leave it right now. And what role could that play in life? And what are we trying to get through it and all that? Answers next week. I'll see you there, right?
Yes.
You'll be there? Okay. Hopefully all of you will
Wouldn't
be
miss
too.
it.
Hope you have a great 7 days in between.
Is Amy Aquarola, Morgan Beard, Curtis Childs, Karen Childs, Matthew Childs, Alexa Cole, John Connolly, Cara Dom, Chris Dunn, Stuart Farmer, Ben Keys, Reed McCardle, Chelsea Odner, Jonathan Rose, Shiloh Silverman, and Shada Sullivan.